Let's give everybody a little extra time to join just because I'm sure they're running back from snack time.
All right, folks. So as we are waiting for some more folks to join us, a couple of things. We did combine the community-based seed group and the home-based group together. And so now there's going to be 3 breakout groups instead of 4. And I think that's, oops, that is our only update. There we go. So Heron, do you think we should wait a little bit more, or?
No, I'd go ahead with the agreements and get the introduction going. I'm sure folks will be in by the time we do the breakout groups.
All right. So before we get back into our visioning, reimagining work, we're going to just briefly go over our community agreements again, invite you all to stay engaged, to listen to a place of love, experience discomfort and sit in productive struggle, and just understand that, that's a process that it has value in and of itself. Speak your truth, speak from the I, avoid using jargon, and be humble, acknowledging that we're not all experts. And finally, to expect and accept non-closure. All right. So with that, we're going to move into kind of this visioning work. I'm just moving over here to generate some action steps. So we're going to be thinking about short-term, medium, and long-term actions that can help leverage opportunities and mitigate some of the challenges that were identified in the previous session. And so again, we're just going to quickly go over the worksheet. And so what will be great is that you have all of your notes and things to reference at the as you scroll up on that document to do this action work. And again, the categories are the same. And when we think about short term, we're talking about 0 to 2 years, medium being 2 to 5, and long term being anything that would take more than 5 years to complete or do successfully. So is there anything that can be clarified for the groups before we move on, or questions or anything that we have to address? All right. So I'm going to stop sharing. And it looks like we have a couple of people who were not able to continue to join us today. And so, again, we hope that note-taking doc really is useful in kind of looking back at what was contributed in the previous session. All right, so having said that, I think we're going to just go ahead and go into our breakout groups and move on into that visioning and action work.
All right. We only have 3 groups now, folks. And as Jackie has said, when I open the room, you can kind of go into the breakout room and hover over your name in the participant list, and your choice of moving should appear. So let me open the rooms, and if you can't join or let us know, and we'll put you where you want to be. We're down to 3 rooms: community and home seed work, seed producer farmer work, and plant breeder seed company work. Okay, here we go. Well, gosh darn, that worked. Third time, we got it. Oh, I almost put Dan in a room by accident there. But
you can teleport me, Aaron.
yeah, well, maybe you want to be in a room.
All right, so I'm setting a timer for, let's see here. Half hour. So I was doing an average of share out times, and I think like 6 minutes
Okay.
is good.
That sounds great.
I should turn a light on. It's getting dark.
I know, I just turned one of mine on and I think it just makes me look creepy. So
Aaron, is it like 0 degrees over where you are?
It has been a howling wind, but one of those super crisp, clear, bright days. But yeah, it's like, I think the thermometer says 8 or something, but it's probably like 10 below with the wind. So
that's where we're at. I got out to take my dog out on a walk this morning, and it was like I got punched in the stomach as soon as I went out the door. So
it's actually a good day to be doing this work. If you're living in Maine, if this is something in the Northeast, like you really can't go outside today in my area. You don't want to. So it's not. It's good to be inside today. So
we were kindred spirits between the sessions, and I needed to get my wood stove going as well. So the 8 degrees, we're going through wood.
Oh, yeah.
The great thing about this is that we still have people showing up, even though Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers are duking it out. And
Who are they?
Exactly. And we got the Buffalo Bills playing, so we'll get this done so those New York people can go watch the Buffalo Bills play.
They're still a thing. I'm kidding.
Crystal's been personally messaging me, ranting about Tom Brady, haven't you, Crystal? So we're good.
It's just snack talk.
I hear you.
All in fun.
All right, folks, welcome back. We are going to get right into share outs with about 6 minutes per group. So we have 3 groups now. And so which of those 3 would like to kick us off?
Do it, Bill.
Right?
The white male does not want to start. That's okay. We'll deal with that. Let me find our notes here. So I'll just go through really quick with each one. And I think we didn't quite make it to the bottom of our sheet, but the bottom being markets, information, resources, community relationships, and communication. That is interwoven throughout the short and long-term ideas that we put down for the other categories. So for germplasm, the short term is increasing the education of how to select and do maintenance. As Donna said so excellently, how to rogue out off types, not just how to grow seed, the education around seed growing, but the education around caring for seed and quality seed and bringing seed back, reinvigorating seed. Medium term, proliferating positive germplasm. So all this great seed that we're learning how to grow and reinvigorate, that we're multiplying it and sharing it widely. Creating and/or fortifying access and distribution infrastructure. Connecting the existing experts to developing networks to create continuity. So we're not repeating and duplicating to the extent that we don't need to. And long-term, expand and maintain distribution infrastructure for seed. So distribution is not just the transfer of seed, but actually the storage of seed as well, as we'll get into in a little bit here. Seed production, short term, is the sharing of the additional knowledge and guidance, increasing mentorships on the production of seed, which we are grateful this week that we had some of that. Medium term development and distribution of hand scale tools. Tools that are accessible for most growers of all scales to be able to process seed on farm or in garden at home. Start developing the shared community around seed production. So one of the things that seems to have come up across a few groups is interest in how we produce and distribute seed while not being a seed company. You know, what are the alternative means of seed distribution and production that are out there? So that speaks to community there. And then long term, yeah, the shared and community infrastructure for larger scale processing. Also, there's developing the awareness. This is a medium term goal for production, excuse me. Developing awareness of who is producing what to promote cooperation instead of competition. It came up that OSA may be working on this model. And we have, of course, the community seed network that Seed Savers Exchange is working on as well. Seed distribution. Is it possible to distribute seed without being a seed company? Apologies for the duplications here. I should just read and not talk. Medium term, how to overcome logistical bottlenecks in the movement of seed from on-farm production to companies and cooperatives. That includes germination testing, which, as Joe mentioned, can be a barrier in terms of being in different climates and having things cleaned up and tested in time for distribution. And then long-term networks in place to facilitate seed distribution through a wide variety of channels. The point was brought up by Travis, centralized storage facilities for seed maybe something that a land-grant university could play a role in. So looking at partnerships between existing institutions that may have infrastructure that can serve towards seed distribution. Climate and environment need to develop storage facilities to hold seed for climate emergencies. The example was given about native seeds in areas where wildfires are and having storage reserves for those seeds. So as climate gets stranger and we adapt, you know, having the facilities to be able to hit reset or to provide emergency relief. Temperate climate research to optimize seed production. What are the best horticultural practices to produce seed, protected culture, and so forth. So doing some research, and then as a long-term, thinking about how to have protected culture growing and other forms of seed growing for climate adaptation. And then in the long term, this is a point we've made before, but our region has the potential to be ahead in the long run if we're planning for the changing climate, because climate in the Northeast is what it is and is incredibly variable. And as Heron has reminded us and others in years past, there is historical precedent for seed growing in this area. And so growing seed in this area, despite its challenges, actually provides an opportunity to have incredibly high quality seed. So we can be thinking about the genetic needs that climate will bring about in other regions and respond with the way that we're growing here. And we talked a little bit about foundation seed versus production seed. So really stewarding and caretaking a base level of seed that could be multiplied for production for seed companies, because we can do the breeding work and the adaptation work in situ in the Northeast. Policy and politics, more coalition building around open source seed, Aussie Open Source Seed Initiative being a model of that. More transparency, increased transparency with intellectual property, and the linking of seed systems to food systems, as Hannah had mentioned earlier. Medium-term goals here would be increased support for public breeding, resulting in open source germplasm. Develop a Northeast policy agenda to communicate to the federal government if there is no existing policy agenda. For example, currently cross-contamination is the burden of the organic grower, but in Europe it's the other direction. Travis was discussing issues with neighbors around contamination of corn and having to actually take acreage out of production, if I'm saying this right, Travis, as a result of neighbor practices. So the burden is really on the organic grower, whereas in areas like Europe, the conventional grower is responsible for any contamination and the ensuing financials that come with that. Let's see, power and access. Short term, just continue to develop an understanding of who owns what and what the models are available, and how we increase transparency about intellectual property. And we just discussed that, really the issue of intellectual property, we don't have time for here, but it's a continuum more than it's an all or none. And so, whereas in some cases there's a case to be made that maybe it makes more sense for work to happen privately, it's certainly in a majority of cases is a case to be made for work being publicly held. And just discussing the gray areas that are hard to navigate at the moment, and how to prevent bioextraction, taking seed from another country or culture and privatizing it, or taking it and making it available widely without consent. So it's as far as we got, and I'm looking at the time, so I think I'll stop there unless anyone from the group wants to chime in to fill it out.
Again, thank you so much, Bill. How about our next group? Home stretch, home stretch.
I'll go next. I was from the plant breeding and seed companies group, and we collectively recognized that we all came through the same lab at the same university. So, that's a limitation in our scope, but also, we were thinking of things through that lens and thinking about ways to, create goals around public breeding programs. But anyway, so starting with some of the short-term goals that we were thinking about, a lot of it was kind of around mapping. So mapping what plant breeding, what public breeding is doing in our region and who it benefits, and mapping where germplasm is sourced from and where economic benefits are flowing or not flowing, connecting those with less access to formal germplasm systems to facilitate more access there. I'm going to jump around a little bit because a lot of these are kind of connected, but for another short-term goals for power and access is building a group like this group here, like in the community of Northeast Organic Seed to source funding for community seed and public or just general plant breeding efforts towards training and network building, holding educational opportunities, kind of similar to what Bill had said about increasing access to selecting plant breeding skills, maintenance skills, those kinds of things. Also, similarly touched on shared appropriate scale equipment, disease and seed testing, those kinds of things for information and resources, and also kind of reaching out to other university breeding programs and labs and students that are in these programs that are, not present in this conference. And then looking at the medium term, strengthening existing networks and creating new networks potentially to support seed production and participatory breeding with mentorship opportunities, redirecting economic benefits towards original germplasm sources where that's lacking, and increasing the knowledge and access to that knowledge for seed production that addresses climate challenges and climate chaos. And then long term, we just had a few things thinking about how to appropriately engage with germplasm and the history of stewardship with formal and informal plant breeding, and also thinking about kind of the policies and institutional issues that would prevent, just the idea of creating maybe additional positions or directing funding towards equitable plant breeding programs in the public sphere. So,
Thank you, Myra.
thank you.
In our last group.
I don't know that we officially assigned anybody, but does anybody who was a participant in the group want to speak for the solutions that we came up with?
I've kind of been the
group rep for the last two, so I can do it again. I don't mind. I did miss a little bit, but hopefully I didn't miss too much because my computer was being silly. So within our group, we did again just go through the community seed work like focus. And with that, we did discuss like a lot of the different challenges and strengths that we saw from the last time. And one of the main keys that we did come up with that most people were discussing the fact that seed libraries were kind of the like the long-term and short-term goal for having access to community seeds, as well as discussing the possibility of trying to have kind of like out of AmeriCorps, like an ag core position. And we also had already addressed the fact that these seed libraries are hard to sustain due to the fact that most of them do not have enough funding and most of the work is volunteer work. And so we were kind of discussing the possibility of how do we get land to this? How do we make sure that it's sustainable and following through on that? As well as the idea of what are the different laws around seed keeping and the challenges for policies within that. What else was it? We also did touch on the different information resources. So the Community Seed Network website was discussed as a potential way for people to network and get information for their communities, and also to just find other people in their communities who are doing successes and what aren't working with their seed libraries. I'm blanking now. I don't actually have the thing on me, but we also did discuss the fact that for sourcing germplasm, we can easily source the different things, but then we also were talking about the fact that we have to be careful about how are we staging these out and how are we going to continue stewarding these varieties. So for example, we discuss the difference between annuals or like 1-year crops versus biannual, or like carrots, which have a 2-year seed season. And then also even further from that, for example, different fruit crops like apple trees, different things like that, those will actually have their entirely own different life cycle. So discussing that, and then how people in these communities can have their own seed stewards or seed librarians, and if there's going to be funding from government or nonprofits to be able to help with that work. There was also the discussion of networking more with agricultural school programs and possibly different places with school gardens, or creating school gardens and having someone be like a liaison between those. But of course, those were like different stages of each of the goals. So yeah, I actually don't have the chart in front of me, but that's what I remember right now. And if anybody else wants to chime in with something else, please do.
Oh, I'm really dark all of a sudden. Yeah, I think you hit it for not looking at it. The one thing that kind of echoed what Mira was saying was, how do we have public accessibility to these private breeding programs? And yeah, I just thought it was fun that we were talking about seed librarians as if that's a reality. I think that'd be so cool. Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you, Katie. And that also did remind me too of the fact that we were discussing climate change and how these seeds are adapting to different regions. And we also did bring up the idea of seed purity, but how we're more interested in getting people interested in seed saving and actually getting them into that position rather than focusing so much on the access of like, is this actually a true to type seed? Because that also like is kind of, as someone else mentioned, like the ability to grow the seed versus the actual purity of the seed are two different things. And getting people within those communities to save their own seeds is also kind of, in some cases, a little bit more important than making sure that's 100% exactly what it was before. And to me, that's also an interesting thing to bring up, is also what type of seeds are people saving at these seed libraries, which we didn't actually address. Like, is it just bean seeds? Is it going to be anything from the brassica family, such as cabbages, which are all related? So that is something that I also just thought of now, because depending on what you're offering through your seed library, that will also depend on the type of seed that will be brought back. And we also did discuss about the fact that some of the different challenges that seed libraries face. For example, if you don't have people who are dedicated to spending and setting these up, and then actually having them for 5 years, that means that a seed library may not actually exist because no one is maintaining it. And one thing that I also did notice is that one of the other sessions talked about land access, and most people in the community seed network did not discuss land access because it was kind of a given that someone had land, and that for a nonprofit community type of deal, someone would be willing to help with that, or people were private owners and they're going to be starting this nonprofit seed library for their community. And so that's also something that is kind of like a running theme with the community seed. It's like, who has access to land, who has access to funding, how are we able to navigate those together? So yeah, that's one thing that I was thinking about.
Thank you so much, Caitlin, Katie. So we've heard from everyone now, so I think we're gonna throw it out for group discussion, clarifying questions, things that are popping up for folks.
I was wondering from the UVM team, I think what I was hearing in a lot of the groups was just being able to create these networks for a lot of different reasons, seed library networks, distribution networks. And I'm wondering like how, if UVM only has the scope to work in Vermont, and if so, what if there are other universities doing similar seed system work in different states, if you know that.
Thank you for the question, Katie. I will say that we are very early on in this work. And so we, not sure that we have a model yet. To the degree possible, we want to be focused on if it's welcome and appropriate and not too much of a time burden, trying to continue to convene and have these kinds of conversations so that we can listen. And I mean, the expertise is with you all, right? And our only job is just to listen and to try to get something on paper and see if it works, and then follow up with future activities if they seem and sound good. We are certainly in Vermont, we've been focused on Vermont just to kind of wrap our heads around like how do we even do a seed system assessment in the United States? A lot of the methodologies are actually from the global South. And so we're trying to learn from, other places and understand the work that's been done with informal seed systems of small scale farmers and in places like centers of origin of how work has been conducted to generate those kinds of networks. So here in Vermont, as I mentioned, we've been doing survey work. We've been doing outreach work with the New American farmers and some indigenous communities. We're going to be following up with convening and so forth, but we're not limited just to Vermont, right? It would be kind of absurd for us to think that a seed system was delimited by geographic boundaries. There's clearly a lot of dynamism, and that that's what we hope to do as we deploy a survey in several months. Well, part of the question is going to be, would you be willing to have your information public? So that could be out with the seed community, so that people can contact various folks about programs or about seeds or whatever it may be. So we are very much on this path with you, trying to figure it out, very open to ideas, and hopefully trying to continue if any traction has been garnered through this experience, trying to leverage that for future opportunities as well.
Great, thank you.
And I'll follow up very quickly in terms of are other universities focused on seed systems? Frankly, it's not something that I have seen. Most of the work in at least North America that is focused on seed is very much positioned within like plant breeders and the much more kind of biological sciences. And so there's not a lot of work that I've seen in the academic realm among social scientists who have done this work. Probably the most famous person was a guy by the name of Jack Kloppenberg. Maybe that name rings a bell. He was at University of Wisconsin for a long time and is now retired. And since then, there has not been a lot of work. So we're Big Tent. We want to be reaching out and collaborating with people in the academic community who are doing this work, but really we want to be reaching out and connecting with the people in the community who are actually doing the good work and finding and identifying ways that we can provide support.
I have a question for those of you that have been participating. We've worked really hard to create this assessment, but it's certainly constrained to the input that we've given it, and which has been considerable. But how would you suggest that we reach more community members, and how do you think we could possibly do this better, or do more of this, or do this more deeply?
So for me, one thing that could actually make it go even deeper is to give people those questions before the session itself, so they can actually brainstorm and actually kind of do more research into just any ideas that they might have, kind of like an idea dump, which is actually something that the Future Harvest did before the annual conference regarding their resilient crisis ready food system, but kind of like a resilient seed system. What do people want? What do you think is there? What are the challenges? And kind of like have those different topics, and then like let people plug in ideas for that, like a survey, a pre-survey, just to get people thinking, and then also like kind of have everybody brainstorming like we were doing. And I definitely agree. I definitely think that the breakout sessions were very helpful for people to kind of just like put in their own little circles and then like see what the overlap was throughout this discussion. I think one thing that for me would definitely try to like reach more people is kind of just advertise more on different social media. I found out about this through an email list through the Seed Savers Exchange. And otherwise I never would have even known that this event was happening. So definitely try to do more outreach ahead of time, and also just advertise on Facebook and Instagram, different social media like that.
Maybe I could add to that also that the focus of this needs assessment centered around the Northeast Seed Conference and those who are in attendance, but it's clear that in following up with this work, we need to find more representatives of other communities. And I don't know if it's sort of a train the trainer situation or if I'm getting the lingo right, but I think having a meeting of folks who are already doing this work in their communities and invested in their communities and putting these questions to them and having them go into the communities themselves, rather than trying to, especially with the constraints of the digital age and COVID, bring everybody under one roof. I think finding those delegates and working with them so that they can report back directly from their communities is crucial to this work. And it's not something that we could do given time constraints and COVID restraints and centering this around the nucleus of the Seed Conference. But I think that would also have the double function of bringing people into the Seed Conference in future years, those who are not limited by accessibility. So I think it serves to both collect the data from those communities who are not represented here today, but also bring them more into the fold. So when we have another conference, they're present there too, and they feel invested.
Yeah, if you all want to follow up with us around like who are the 10 people we should talk to that you know, or what are the like 5 organizations that you should be asking these questions of. They might not be doing seed work yet, but they're like the hubs of agricultural work in our communities.
One other thing too is that I know that this day is not affiliated specifically with the Northeast Organic Farm Alliance, the New York chapter. However, there are other chapters too. Like for example, this coming weekend, the New Jersey chapter is having their own conference, and a wonderful Native American speaker, Rowan White, is going to be there. And she is also very much a seed saver in the community and also on the board of the Seed Savers Exchange. So I would definitely suggest Rowan White as someone to talk to about this. But I don't know if she even knew about this event, but she might have wanted to be here if she knew. So discussing it with other chapters and different organic farming alliances or other farmer alliances might also help spread the net.
Yeah, Karen.
Yeah, Rowan totally knows all about this event, and we talked to her. You know, she's been involved in the loop of helping at various different points. And I think the thing that I want to just reflect back to everybody is, just like this conference was a grassroots effort organized by a lot of people, all of these solutions or ways to connect with folks, like these are your solutions. Like when we say what the actions are that can do this, like we didn't get to this. I can tell you, I didn't get to this spot with this work knowing what the next step was. I don't have a plan after this, meaning like this is us making the plan. It's the beginning of making a plan. So I want to frame that when you ask yourself, what are the actions? What are the solutions? Is like part of this is coming here is, and I know you all own work. I'm not claiming anyone in this group doesn't own work. So it's a little bit of like, how do we own this work together? How do we think about this together? And how do we make connections to make these actions work? So when I'm hearing you all, and when we say, you know, we could do this, we could do that, I'm going to recruit you to do whatever it is that we suggest, that you suggest, that we all suggest, because it really isn't going to get done any other way. Like no one's getting paid really to do this work. So we're asking us all to take a piece of that bread and break it into pieces, you know, and share it with others. So I just want to frame that as like, what are we doing here today? There is not a group who's paid to take this away, a nonprofit that's paid to take away this and turn it into solutions. Although there's lots of folks here from different groups. So let's ask ourselves, what does that mean? What are we taking away from this? And you know, for me, I take away, like, I'm a kind of person that steals things when I go to events. You know, Bill knows I stole a hanky from an event I was at like 4 years ago. And I'm just gonna frame like Lauren and Crystal and Myra and a couple other folks. I showed folks this earlier. This is a Saratoga Springs mineral bottle that I stole from the needs assessment we did like in 2015. And so that needs assessment that was done in 2015 in Saratoga Springs was like really just strictly seed companies and It's not this. This is a better beginning point. But like a lot of the folks that worked on it were there. We took something and it turned into something, and here we are again. And so like whatever it is you have today, whatever it is you took from this conference, like save something more than the chat, but save the chat. But like save something for yourself to know what it mattered to be either here today or here during the week if you weren't here. And like make this something that you want to do. So I'm just framing that. That's like, I was going to say this at the end, but I'm saying it now. Love you all. Thank you very much.
So I think that's a good note to kind of wrap up on our last slide here. And I'm going to ask, could someone unmute themselves and read this Audre Lorde quote for us?
Okay, sure. I've spoken enough today. I can finish it up too. So from Audre Lorde, Learning from the 60s. To refuse to participate in the shaping of our future is to give it up. Do not be misled into passivity, either by false security, they don't mean me, or by despair, there's nothing we can do. Each of us must find our work and do it.
Thank you, Caitlin. Beautiful. So, you know, this, and so to give context to that quote there, if you read the original text that comes from, Audre Lorde is writing and speaking specifically to the Black community. But I think that it's important to note that, you know, these notes and messages of the people who are the change makers are universal. And so I think it's a beautiful call to action. I think this kind of gets to what Heron was I think trying to say, that right, we all need to take agency, right? And so, you know, part of this was also thinking about, you know, to Hannah's point of how do we continue to stay connected and to do this work. So question in the chat from Maddie, is there going to be any communal version of the docs we edited today? Yeah, so Dan, is that the response there?
Yeah, well, our plan is at this point to this is not the only information that we want to be taking a look at. You know, the notes that we've taken over the course of the week and the perspectives that have been voiced today, as well as in a few months a follow-up survey, and putting all of that information together and trying to put it together in I don't know what it's going to look like at this point, but something that tries to synthesize it all, and then we want to share that with the community for the community's contributions and feedback and input. The plan is certainly open to amendments and modifications, but that has, at this point, that is what the plan is. But you know, what is the old saying? Planning is everything and plans are nothing. So we are certainly open to suggestions.
Yeah, and I'd like to say that the recordings of everything that happened this week, video recordings and everything, this amorphous, non-whatever, lack of profit entity, we're going to figure out a way to post all of the seed session recordings. Either it's going to be a YouTube channel, or it's going to be in like a bazillion other places, like at Seed Savers and at Seed Shed and at Freed Seed or wherever. Whoever wants it basically gets to have it, as long as they're willing to post the content. So that's the great thing about doing this, is that we all own it. So there is content available through NOFA New York for the next month or so, but like, don't worry, it's not going anywhere. We just got to figure out a little post-production stuff and, you know, get it somewhere, get it into as many people's hands. So some of you, I'll be bugging you via email, being like, what do you want to do with this? Do you want to do something with this? So we're trying to bring this stuff forward from the week.
Yeah, and you know, we have tossed around the idea of even trying to do more of this at more events. Of course, then it still limits accessibility to this sort of work to people who can attend these events. And it's so important to reach into your communities and reach into the people that you know. I mean, I have absolutely no illusion in my head that we've really interviewed everyone and anyone that we should be interviewing in the Northeast region. So there's no way for us to reach into these communities without you know, and Una, like you said, you know, ask all of you to put forth 10 more names and 10 more names and 10 more names. And it's the community effort. It's building the relationships, it's building the connections and breaking down the barriers that we can meet on common ground and you know, share common ideas and, you know, use language that includes all of us.
So the big share is going on in the chat there, folks. piled in all the emails. And don't forget to save the chat, which is usually in these kind of on these three little buttons or little dots at the end of this. That's down where you type things in for the chat. But yeah.
All right, so thank you everyone for sharing this Sunday with us. It's been a long week, a long day, and we're all so thankful. I'm especially thankful to Carina, to Megnot, to Heron, to Dan, to Hannah. Even though, we'd all probably be happy if like a couple of days go by that we don't get a flurry of emails from each other. So thank you to everyone who volunteered to be a facilitator and to note take. Sincerest gratitude. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I am very grateful to everyone that is here and people who were here earlier and couldn't spend the whole day. But working with you, Jackie, and Dan and Megnot and Carina and Heron, shepherding us all along from behind the scenes. It's been pretty incredible, and we've got so much more to do. This is just, wiping our feet on the welcome mat. So.
And also a great thanks to Anna Mohammed for being the tech support behind the scenes. You certainly saved me yet again, Anna, so I'm grateful for it. But just tremendously appreciative that we've made this effort, and now we all have the responsibility to act on it. And at risk of taking a quote out of context, James Baldwin once said that responsibility cannot be lost, it can only be abdicated. So when we refuse abdication, we begin again. And so here we are, and I look forward to continuing to begin again with all of you in this seed endeavor. So thank you so much for being a part of it.
Great job, everybody. I've never been so impressed by a virtual conference. It's the most professional thing I've ever seen. Such amazing information. What a great community. And to everyone that has worked for months and weeks, I think it just couldn't have gone better. So congratulations to you all. Heron, you deserve a seed spa day now. So, seed spa for everyone. Great job.
Thank you.
The seeds get caught in the creases in my ears though if I dive into them, so.
No, you have to make like a
loofah
loofah scrub out of all the chaff, like, value added for the Winnow Wizard byproducts.
I'm thinking like just hydrated basil seeds, like, laying in a little tub.
Hydrogels.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I love that.
I will tell you, I'm just gonna.
Have a good night, everybody.
I'm just gonna try. I just need to shave and do my dishes. That's all.
Don't shave. I'm coming on now while we're on the subject to say the beard's crushing it, and don't get rid of it.
Never change, Heron. Looks great.
Salt and pepper. I stand with you.
All right.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Blessings to the